It's Friday the 13th, October 1307. Across Europe, simultaneous raids shatter the pre-dawn silence. Knights in white mantles bearing red crosses are dragged from their beds, their temples seized, their treasures confiscated. The most powerful military order in Christendom falls in a single coordinated strike. But what if everything you've been told about the Knights Templar's sudden destruction is merely the surface of a far deeper mystery? What if their true crime wasn't heresy or blasphemy, but rather the discovery of secrets so profound they threaten to reshape humanity's understanding of its own history? Tonight, we embark on a journey through the shadows of the past to uncover the Knights Templar forbidden history and their secret quest for Atlantis, a quest that may still continue in our modern world. Before we begin this mysterious journey together, I'd love to know where you are in the world right now and what time it is for you. It's fascinating to think about how this ancient mystery connects listeners across different continents and time zones. Now settle in, relax, and let's dive into the Templars' Atlantean quest together. Our story begins not in the Holy Land, but in the magnificent city of Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, where east meets west across the shimmering waters of the Bosphorus. The year is 1095, and the Byzantine capital pulses with the wisdom of ages. Here, in the shadows of the Hagia Sophia, dwells a mysterious brotherhood that history has largely forgotten, the Brothers of the East. These weren't ordinary monks or scholars. They practiced an ancient form of mysticism that transcended the boundaries of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. In their hidden chambers carved from the living rock beneath the city's foundations, they studied alchemy and sacred geometry, mapping the movements of celestial bodies and unlocking the mathematical secrets encoded in music and architecture. Their libraries contained texts written in languages that predated Greek and Latin, inscribed on materials that seemed to resist the passage of time itself. The brothers were the inheritors of knowledge that stretched back through millennia, guardians of wisdom that predated all the world's major religions. They traced their lineage through carefully maintained oral traditions that connected them to the mystery schools of ancient Egypt, the astronomical colleges of Babylon, and the philosophical academies of pre-Islamic Persia. Each generation had added to their understanding while preserving the essential core of teachings that remained constant across cultures and centuries. Within their sanctuary, surrounded by scrolls and codices that the outside world believed lost forever, they maintained detailed maps of the world that included land masses European cartographers wouldn't discover for another 4 centuries. They possessed astronomical calculations that accurately predicted eclipses, planetary alignments, and celestial events with precision that wouldn't be matched by official science until the Renaissance. Most remarkably, they preserved architectural blueprints and engineering specifications for structures whose construction principles modern builders still struggle to understand. The brothers possessed something extraordinary: detailed accounts of a lost civilization that once spanned the globe. Not the simple island nation described by Plato in his philosophical dialogues, but a sophisticated worldwide culture that had achieved technological and spiritual advancement beyond our modern comprehension. They called it by many names: Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu the first time. But all their sources described the same fundamental reality. Humanity had once achieved a golden age of abundance, wisdom, and harmony with natural forces. This ancient civilization hadn't merely built impressive monuments or accumulated vast wealth. According to the carefully preserved records studied by the brothers, the Atlanteans had solved the fundamental problems that continued to plague medieval society: poverty, disease, warfare, and spiritual ignorance. They had developed technologies that worked in harmony with natural forces rather than dominating them, creating abundance without environmental destruction. Their understanding of consciousness and its relationship to physical reality enabled healing methods that seemed miraculous, communication techniques that transcended physical distance, and transportation systems that utilized forces unknown to conventional physics. The brothers understood that this wasn't merely ancient history, but a blueprint for humanity's future potential. They believed that the cyclical nature of time would eventually bring conditions suitable for the restoration of such a civilization, but only if the essential knowledge could be preserved through the dark ages of ignorance and conflict that inevitably followed each Golden Age's destruction. Into this world of ancient secrets stepped Hugh de Payens, a nobleman from the county of Champagne in France. Hugh was no ordinary crusader seeking military glory or territorial conquest. His family had deep connections to the mystical traditions of Islam through generations of trade relationships with Sufi masters along the Mediterranean routes. He had been educated by tutors who valued Arabic mathematical texts and Greek philosophical works that most Western nobles dismissed as pagan heresy. More importantly, he possessed an unusually open mind for a man of his time, a quality that had not gone unnoticed by observers who valued such rare characteristics. The Brothers of the East had been watching Hugh for years, evaluating his character through carefully arranged encounters and subtle tests. They observed his treatment of servants and enemies, his response to temptation and adversity, his capacity for discretion, and his ability to grasp complex philosophical concepts. Most crucially, they assessed his spiritual development and his genuine commitment to serving humanity's highest good rather than pursuing personal advancement. The meeting between Hugh and the brothers changed the course of history, though few would understand its significance for centuries to come. In hushed tones by flickering candlelight, in chambers that had witnessed such conversations for generations, they revealed to him the truth about Atlantis, not a myth created by philosophers, but a memory preserved by survivors who had witnessed civilization's greatest achievement and its most catastrophic failure. They showed him maps carved in stone that depicted continents in their ancient configurations before the great cataclysm had reshaped the Earth's surface. They shared texts written in symbols that predated all known writing systems, describing technologies that would seem magical to medieval minds. Instantaneous communication across vast distances through crystalline devices that resonated with human consciousness. The ability to levitate massive stone blocks as if they weighed nothing through understanding of gravitational forces, complete mastery over weather patterns and agricultural cycles that eliminated famine and want. The Atlanteans, according to these preserved accounts, had achieved what every civilization dreams of but few approach: true abundance. Poverty was virtually unknown because their energy systems provided unlimited power for all human needs. War had become obsolete because resource scarcity, the root cause of most conflicts, had been eliminated through technologies that could transform matter at the molecular level. Disease was rare because their understanding of consciousness and its relationship to physical health enabled healing methods that addressed root causes rather than merely treating symptoms. Their cities connected across continents through transportation networks that defied conventional understanding, housed populations that lived in harmony with natural cycles while enjoying technological conveniences that surpassed modern capabilities. Medical knowledge allowed lifespans that extended far beyond normal human limits, not through artificial life support, but through genuine rejuvenation techniques that maintained vitality and mental clarity across centuries of experience. But this paradise was not eternal. The brothers revealed the terrible truth that every golden age must face the corruption of power and the gradual abandonment of the wisdom principles that had created abundance in the first place. As generations passed, the Atlanteans began to take their capabilities for granted, using their technologies for personal advantage rather than collective benefit. Spiritual practices that required discipline and genuine development were abandoned in favour of mechanical shortcuts that provided temporary powers without lasting wisdom. The final catastrophe came not from external enemies but from internal decay. The misuse of their most powerful technologies created instabilities in the forces they had learned to manipulate. In a single catastrophic day, earthquakes shook the world. Volcanoes erupted simultaneously across multiple continents, and great floods swept away cities and civilizations that had endured for millennia. The few survivors scattered to remote corners of the earth, carrying fragments of their knowledge like precious seeds, hoping that future generations might prove wiser than their predecessors. Some of that knowledge found its way to Egypt, contributing to the mysteries of the pyramids and the advanced mathematical principles that enabled their construction. Other pieces influenced the builders of Stonehenge, providing the astronomical knowledge necessary for creating such precise celestial calendars. The astronomers of the Maya received fragments that enabled their incredibly accurate predictions of planetary movements and eclipse cycles. The philosophers of ancient Greece inherited conceptual frameworks that would shape Western thought for millennia. But the most important artifacts, the actual technological devices that had powered Atlantean civilization, had been carefully hidden before the final collapse. The brothers revealed to Hugh that some of the most powerful Atlantean artifacts had survived the Great Cataclysm, preserved in chambers specifically designed to withstand such catastrophic events. And they knew exactly where these treasures lay hidden. Deep beneath the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, protected by ingenious mechanisms that had maintained their secrecy for thousands of years. Time was running short. The First Crusade had captured Jerusalem in 1099, creating a brief window of Christian control in the Holy Land that provided unprecedented access to sites that had been forbidden to Western explorers for centuries. But multiple groups, Christian, Jewish and Muslim, were all searching for the same legendary treasures. Political instability threatened to close this opportunity forever, and if these artifacts fell into the wrong hands, or if they were lost again to war and chaos, humanity might wait another millennium for such powerful tools of transformation. Hugh accepted the mission with 8 carefully chosen companions, understanding that they carried the hopes and dreams of ages. They would travel to Jerusalem under the cover of protecting Christian pilgrims, but their true purpose was far more significant: to recover the technological heritage of humanity's lost golden age and preserve it until the world proved ready for such magnificent gifts. Little did they know that their quest would birth legends that would echo through 8 centuries to our own time, inspiring seekers and treasure hunters, while concealing truths that could transform human civilization itself. Before we continue deeper into this mystery, if you're finding this journey as fascinating as I am, please hit that like button and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support helps us bring more of these hidden histories to light. The transition from the mystical libraries of Constantinople to the harsh realities of the Holy Land must have tested every aspect of the Nine Knights' resolve. By 1120 CE, Hugh de Payens and his companions had established themselves in Jerusalem, bearing the humble title of poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The irony of their name would become apparent soon enough. These men were about to uncover treasures beyond the dreams of kings, while maintaining the appearance of poverty that their public mission required. Their public mission provided perfect cover for their true purpose, though it demanded genuine commitment and considerable personal risk. Medieval Jerusalem teemed with pilgrims from across Christendom, many travelling along dangerous roads where bandits waited to prey upon the faithful. The journey to the Holy Land was treacherous enough under the best circumstances, with desert heat, inadequate supplies, disease, and the constant threat of attack by hostile forces. The knights' offer to provide armed escort seemed both noble and necessary to local authorities struggling to maintain order in their newly conquered territories. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem welcomed their presence with enthusiasm, recognizing both their military value and their apparent dedication to Christian principles. The king's grant of quarters in the ruins of Solomon's Temple was presented as a generous gesture to worthy religious warriors, but it placed the knights exactly where they needed to be for their secret mission. The irony was perfect. They were being housed in the very location they had travelled thousands of miles to reach, with official permission to live and work in areas that would normally be forbidden to foreign soldiers. The Temple Mount location provided ideal conditions for their clandestine operations. The ruins offered multiple chambers and passages that could conceal their activities, while the religious significance of the site ensured that curious observers would maintain respectful distance. The Knights established themselves as model tenants, maintaining the ruins with care and dedication that impressed both religious and secular authorities. Their reputation for piety and discipline grew with each passing month, providing additional protection for their secret work. By day, the Knights fulfilled their public duties with dedication that impressed all who observed them. They rode out along the pilgrim routes in formations that had been carefully planned to maximize both effectiveness and visibility. Their white mantles and red crosses became familiar sights along the dusty roads leading to Jerusalem, symbols of safety and protection that pilgrims learned to watch for when traveling through dangerous territories. Their reputation for courage and piety grew with each successful escort mission, each rescue of travelers in distress, each demonstration of their commitment to their stated mission. But as the sun set over the ancient stones of Jerusalem, their real work began. The transformation from public religious warriors to secret archaeological excavators required careful planning and absolute discretion. They had established secure storage areas for their equipment, developed systems for disposing of excavated material without attracting attention, and created cover stories to explain their frequent presence in restricted areas of the temple complex during nighttime hours. The Brothers of the East had provided them with remarkably precise information about what lay beneath the Temple Mount, but translating ancient texts into practical excavation strategies proved more challenging than they had anticipated. The descriptions were written in symbolic language that required careful interpretation, using architectural terms and measurement systems that had been obsolete for centuries. Maps drawn on materials that predated conventional cartographic methods had to be correlated with the actual topography of the site, taking into account changes caused by earthquake damage, construction projects, and the accumulation of debris from successive occupations. Working in carefully planned shifts, they excavated through layers of rubble and soil that recorded the passage of empires like pages in a book written in stone and pottery, Roman coins mixed with Byzantine pottery, bearing witness to centuries of imperial occupation. Crusader weapons lay alongside Saracen artifacts, testament to the recent battles that had brought Jerusalem under Christian control. Each layer told the story of Jerusalem's turbulent history, but they dug deeper than any conqueror had ever delved, following architectural clues that most would have dismissed as meaningless decorative symbols. The physical challenges of their excavation were enormous. Working by torchlight in cramped underground spaces, they had to move tons of rubble and soil without mechanical aids, using only medieval tools and human muscle power. The risk of cave-ins required careful shoring of passages and chambers as they progressed deeper into the earth. The disposal of excavated material had to be accomplished without attracting attention, requiring systematic distribution of soil and stones to locations where their presence wouldn't raise questions. Modern archaeological evidence supports accounts of extensive tunneling operations beneath the Temple Mount, though political and religious sensitivities severely limit investigation of these areas. Researchers have documented passages and chambers that show clear signs of medieval excavation, with tool marks and construction techniques that match the period of Templar occupation. The systematic approach evident in these underground works demonstrates planning and knowledge that goes far beyond random treasure hunting or casual exploration. Ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive techniques have revealed the existence of large underground chambers and complex passage systems that have never been fully explored. Israeli, Palestinian, and international authorities continue to restrict access to these areas, citing security concerns and religious sensitivities that may conceal archaeological motivations. The political complexity of Temple Mount excavation ensures that many secrets remain buried beneath layers of diplomatic complexity as well as physical debris. After months of careful excavation, following clues that had been preserved in texts older than Christianity itself, they achieved their first breakthrough. Behind a wall of stones that had remained undisturbed since before the time of Christ, they discovered a chamber unlike anything in their medieval experience. The construction was extraordinary. Walls of acacia wood overlaid with the finest gold, created with craftsmanship that surpassed anything in the medieval world. The preservation was so perfect that it seemed as if the chamber had been sealed only yesterday, despite being buried for over a millennium. The environmental conditions within the chamber defied explanation by medieval understanding. The air remained fresh and breathable despite centuries of confinement. The temperature stayed constant regardless of the external weather conditions. Most remarkably, the chamber seemed to resist the humidity and corrosion that should have destroyed organic materials and metal objects over such vast periods of time. The Knights began to suspect that the preservation wasn't accidental, but the result of techniques and technologies that their own era couldn't duplicate. The dimensions of the chamber matched ancient descriptions exactly, confirming the accuracy of the texts that had guided their excavation. But this was merely the beginning of their discoveries. As they methodically explored the underground complex, they realized they had found not just one chamber, but an entire repository of interconnected rooms and passages. Each new discovery required careful documentation and preservation techniques that pushed the limits of medieval knowledge and forced them to develop new methods for handling materials of incalculable value. The Knights established a sophisticated system for cataloguing and moving their discoveries. Working only during the darkest hours of night, they transported artifacts through carefully planned routes to secure storage locations that they had prepared throughout Jerusalem and the surrounding countryside. They understood that concentrating such treasures in a single location would invite disaster, so they created multiple caches with detailed records of contents and locations that were shared only among the inner circle of their brotherhood. Their operation required levels of security and coordination that would have impressed modern intelligence organizations. They developed coded communication systems that enabled them to share information about their discoveries without risking exposure if their messages were intercepted. They established trusted contacts throughout the region, creating networks of support that could provide assistance, supplies, and early warning of potential threats to their mission. Each artifact discovered required individual assessment and specialized handling procedures. Some items were obviously valuable because of their precious metal content and gemstone decoration, but the Knights quickly learned that the most important discoveries were often the least impressive in appearance. Simple-looking devices made from unknown materials or inscribed with symbols they couldn't read often proved to have properties that defied conventional understanding of how physical objects should behave. As their excavation progressed over nearly 2 decades, the scale of their discoveries became clear. They had uncovered evidence of a civilization whose technological achievements challenged every assumption about the ancient world. Stone tablets covered with mathematical formulas that wouldn't be rediscovered by European scholars for centuries. Mechanical devices with moving parts so precisely crafted that they still functioned after millennia of storage. Most importantly, they had found functional artifacts, devices that still possessed the power to transform human understanding of energy, consciousness, and the fundamental nature of reality itself. The weight of their responsibility must have been overwhelming. They held in their hands the keys to a golden age, but they also understood the dangers of releasing such power into a world torn by religious warfare and political ambition. The Crusades had demonstrated humanity's capacity for destruction when convinced of religious righteousness. The political instability of medieval Europe showed how quickly beneficial technologies could be perverted into instruments of oppression and control. Their decision to remain guardians rather than revolutionaries reflected profound wisdom born from direct experience with the power they had discovered. They could have used their findings to accumulate wealth and political influence, potentially changing the course of medieval history through the premature introduction of advanced capabilities. Instead, they chose the more difficult path of preservation and preparation, understanding that humanity's spiritual development needed to match its technological capabilities if civilization was to avoid the catastrophic fate that had befallen Atlantis. The Jerusalem excavation established the foundation for everything that would follow in Templar history. The knowledge they gained, the artifacts they recovered, and the responsibility they accepted shaped their evolution from a small group of knights into an international organization that would influence the development of human civilization for centuries to come, always working toward the eventual restoration of humanity's lost golden age. The incredible discoveries. Deep beneath the ancient stones of Temple Mount, the Knights Templar made discoveries that challenged everything they thought they knew about history, religion, and the nature of reality itself. What they found in those carefully preserved chambers would have seemed impossible to medieval minds, artifacts that bridge the gap between the spiritual and the technological, between the legendary and the tangible, between human aspiration and divine capability. The centerpiece of their discoveries was not one Ark of the Covenant, but 6 magnificent containers of identical construction. Each stood approximately 4 feet long, 2.5 feet wide, and 2.5 feet high, crafted from acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold, so refined that it seemed to glow with inner light, even in the darkness of their underground chambers. The famous ark described in biblical accounts was merely the first of a collection that revealed the true scope of Atlantean technology and the worldwide network that had once connected all human civilizations. The construction of these arks demonstrated engineering principles that wouldn't be understood by mainstream science for centuries. The wood had been treated with substances that prevented decay while enhancing its natural resonant properties. The gold overlay wasn't merely decorative, but formed intricate circuit patterns that channeled and focused energies in ways that medieval physics couldn't explain. Internal mechanisms, visible through careful examination of seams and joints, incorporated crystalline components and metallic alloys that didn't match any materials known to medieval craftsmen. These arks were far more than religious artifacts. They were sophisticated energy storage and generation devices designed to interact with specific architectural features found in pyramid structures around the world. The precise dimensions weren't arbitrary measurements chosen for symbolic reasons, but functional specifications that enabled the arcs to resonate with natural energy fields and artificial focusing systems built into ancient monuments. The careful selection of materials, the intricate internal mechanisms, the complex geometric patterns inscribed in their construction, everything pointed to a global network of power generation that had once provided unlimited clean energy to an advanced civilization. The implications were staggering. The Great Pyramid of Giza, rather than being a tomb for dead pharaohs, revealed itself as a power station designed to house and activate these remarkable devices. The King's Chamber, with its granite walls and precise measurements, was perfectly sized to accommodate an ark and amplify its energy output through resonant frequencies that could be transmitted across vast distances. Similar structures on every continent, from the pyramids of Mexico and Central America to the megalithic monuments of Europe and Asia, suggested a worldwide civilization that had achieved technological unity on a scale that modern humanity could barely imagine. Carbon dating and other analytical techniques applied to samples from the arks produced results that confounded medieval understanding and would continue to puzzle modern scientists. The organic materials showed evidence of preservation techniques that maintained cellular integrity across millennia, while the metallic components displayed isotopic ratios that suggested manufacturing processes requiring capabilities far beyond ancient metalworking traditions. Most puzzling of all, the crystalline elements exhibited properties that seemed to violate established laws of physics, maintaining coherent energy patterns that conventional materials science couldn't explain. Among the sacred relics they discovered was the legendary Holy Grail, but not the simple cup of medieval Romance literature. Instead, they found a sophisticated device that appeared to be designed for consciousness, enhancement and healing, incorporating principles of sacred geometry and materials that seemed to resonate with human neural patterns. The Grail's construction combined artistic beauty with functional engineering, featuring internal chambers and mechanisms that could process organic substances while generating field effects that influenced mental and physical states. The device showed evidence of having been used for centuries before its concealment, with residue patterns that suggested regular processing of organic materials, possibly the biblical manna or similar consciousness-enhancing substances described in ancient texts from cultures worldwide. The Knights discovered that the Grail wasn't a passive container, but an active technology for expanding human potential, capable of producing substances that enhanced mental clarity, accelerated healing, and facilitated spiritual experiences that connected users directly to transcendent states of consciousness. The Spear of Destiny proved to be another marvel of ancient engineering, a device that could focus and direct energy with surgical precision while maintaining perfect stability in the user's hands. Rather than a weapon in the conventional sense, it appeared to be a tool for both healing and construction, capable of manipulating matter at the molecular level through controlled application of forces that medieval physics couldn't identify or measure. The spear's tip incorporated crystalline focusing elements that concentrated energy into beams that could cut through solid stone or stimulate cellular regeneration, depending on the user's intent and training. Historical accounts of the spear's effects on those who wielded it took on new meaning when understood as descriptions of actual technological capabilities rather than supernatural interventions. The device seemed to enhance the user's mental faculties and physical coordination while providing direct feedback about the molecular structure of targeted materials. In the hands of someone with proper training, it could perform surgical procedures that exceeded the capabilities of medieval medicine or construction tasks that required precision beyond conventional tools. Perhaps most significant was their discovery of the Emerald Tablet, not just inscribed with cryptic alchemical formulas, but containing complete scientific instructions for transforming matter and energy through processes that combined physical techniques with consciousness-directed procedures. The tablet revealed the secrets of producing what the ancients called mana, a white powder with properties that seemed to violate every law of physics the Knights understood. The tablet's inscriptions weren't merely symbolic representations, but functional instructions for laboratory procedures that required sophisticated understanding of chemistry, physics, and the relationship between consciousness and physical matter. The text described processes for extracting and refining substances from gold, platinum, and organic materials that produced powders with superconducting properties, levitation capabilities, and remarkable effects on human physiology and mental development. But the most shocking discoveries challenged the very foundations of their religious faith. They found ossuaries containing the bones of figures from Christian history, accompanied by documents that contradicted official church teachings about the lives and deaths of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and other central figures in Christian tradition. Evidence of Jesus' family life, alternative religious texts that emphasized the divine feminine principle, and practices that bore more resemblance to Gnostic mysticism than Orthodox Christianity forced the Knights to confront uncomfortable questions about the authenticity of church doctrine. These revelations suggested that the true teachings of Christ had been systematically suppressed in favor of a version that concentrated power in the hands of religious institutions rather than empowering individual spiritual development. The Knights discovered texts that described Jesus as an advanced spiritual teacher who'd been trained in the same traditions that produced the Atlantean civilization, possessing knowledge of consciousness manipulation and energy healing that had been carefully hidden from mainstream Christianity. The documents revealed that Mary Magdalene hadn't been a reformed prostitute, but a highly trained priestess who had worked as Jesus' equal partner in establishing a spiritual movement based on direct experience rather than institutional authority. Their children had carried on these traditions through bloodlines that preserved both genetic potential and taught knowledge across generations of carefully maintained secrecy. The mana technology proved to be the most revolutionary discovery of all. This white powder, extractable from gold, platinum, and certain organic materials through alchemical processes described on the emerald tablet, displayed superconducting properties that enabled levitation, energy transmission, and remarkable effects on human consciousness and physiology. Ancient texts from cultures worldwide described similar substances using different names but identical properties and effects. The biblical manna that sustained the Israelites in the desert took on new meaning when understood as descriptions of a nutritionally complete substance that also enhanced mental clarity and spiritual awareness. Sumerian texts describing Shimana as the substance that powered their flying craft aligned perfectly with the levitation properties the Knights observed in their experiments with properly prepared mana samples. Hindu and Jain scriptures spoke of mana as the force that enabled aerial vehicles and supernatural abilities, while Polynesian traditions described mana as a natural force that could be cultivated and directed by those with proper knowledge. The production methods required sophisticated understanding of chemistry and physics that wouldn't be rediscovered by mainstream science for another 7 centuries, combined with consciousness development techniques that enabled practitioners to influence molecular transformations through directed mental energy. The Knights learned to extract this remarkable substance using alchemical equipment that had to be constructed according to principles of sacred geometry, with measurements and proportions that created resonant fields, enhancing the transformation process. The universality of mana references across disconnected cultures provided compelling evidence for the global reach of Atlantean civilization. The consistency of descriptions, the similarity of reported effects, and the identical production techniques suggested a common source of knowledge that had been preserved in fragmentary form throughout human history. The Knights began to understand that they had discovered not just isolated artifacts, but components of a complete technological system that had once unified human civilization in an age of abundance and wisdom. As they studied the interconnections between these discoveries, a picture emerged of a civilization that had achieved perfect balance between spiritual development and technological advancement. The Atlanteans hadn't merely built impressive monuments or accumulated wealth. They had created a society where abundance eliminated the root causes of human conflict. Poverty, disease, and ignorance were virtually unknown because their technology provided solutions to humanity's fundamental challenges, while their spiritual practices ensured that power was used wisely rather than selfishly. The Knights realized they held the keys to a new golden age, but they also understood the catastrophic dangers of releasing such power prematurely. Their own era was marked by crusades, inquisitions, and constant warfare between kingdoms and religions. How could such a violent and superstitious world be trusted with technology that could either elevate humanity to unprecedented heights or destroy civilization entirely through the same misuse that had doomed Atlantis? Their decision to become guardians rather than revolutionaries was born from this profound understanding of human nature and historical cycles. They would preserve these treasures, study their principles, and gradually prepare humanity for eventual readiness through the careful introduction of beneficial knowledge and the patient development of wisdom traditions that could handle such magnificent and dangerous capabilities. Their brotherhood would endure across centuries, waiting for an age when spiritual evolution might finally overcome the destructive impulses that had repeatedly led civilizations toward catastrophic collapse. The ancient technology, the true marvel of what the Knights Templar discovered beneath Temple Mount, was not merely the existence of ancient artifacts, but the realization that these objects represented a complete technological system that had once powered a global civilization. As they studied the intricate mechanisms and mysterious materials, they began to understand principles of energy and consciousness that would remain hidden from mainstream science for centuries to come. At the heart of this ancient technology was a substance known by many names across many cultures, but which the Knights came to understand as the key to Atlantean power: mana. This white powder possessed properties that seemed to defy the laws of physics as medieval minds understood them. When they analysed samples found within the artifacts, they discovered material that exhibited superconducting characteristics, levitation capabilities, and remarkable effects on human consciousness and physiology. The universality of mana references across cultures provided compelling evidence for the global reach of Atlantean civilization. The biblical accounts of mana feeding the Israelites in the desert took on new meaning when understood as descriptions of a nutritionally complete substance that also enhanced mental clarity and spiritual awareness. Sumerian texts describing Shimana as the substance that powered their flying craft aligned perfectly with the levitation properties the Knights observed in their experiments. Hindu and Jain scriptures spoke of mana as the force that enabled aerial vehicles and supernatural abilities. Polynesian traditions described mana as a natural force that could be cultivated and directed by those with proper knowledge. Buddhist texts referenced mani as a spiritual substance that enhanced consciousness and healing. The consistency of these accounts across disconnected cultures suggested a common source of knowledge that had been preserved in fragmentary form throughout human history. The scientific properties of mana challenged every assumption about matter and energy. In its monatomic gold form, it displayed zero resistance to electrical current, suggesting superconducting capabilities that modern science wouldn't rediscover until the 20th century. When subjected to magnetic fields, samples levitated with stability that indicated controlled gravitational effects. Most remarkably, human consumption of properly prepared mana appeared to enhance cognitive function, accelerate healing, and produce states of consciousness that medieval mystics could only describe as divine communion. The production methods required sophisticated understanding of both chemistry and consciousness. The Knights learned that creating high-quality mana demanded not only precise laboratory techniques, but also specific mental and spiritual states in the practitioners. The alchemical texts they discovered described processes that integrated physical procedures with meditation, prayer, and ritual observance. The production equipment itself needed to be constructed according to principles of sacred geometry, with measurements and proportions that created resonant fields, enhancing the transformation process. The connection between mana technology and pyramid structures revealed the true purpose of these monuments scattered across every continent. Rather than tombs or temples, the pyramids were power stations designed to harness and amplify the energy properties of mana-based devices. The King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid of Giza provided the perfect example. Its granite construction, precise measurements, and acoustic properties created an ideal environment for arc activation and energy generation. The stone box found in the King's Chamber, long assumed to be a sarcophagus, revealed its true purpose when the Knights compared its dimensions to those of their discovered arcs. The fit was exact, designed to house and activate the energy storage devices that powered Atlantean civilization. No mummy had ever been found because no burial had ever taken place. The chamber was a technological installation, not a tomb. Tesla's later attempts to develop wireless energy transmission at Wardenclyffe Tower followed principles remarkably similar to those encoded in Atlantean technology. His work with resonant frequencies, electromagnetic fields, and atmospheric energy manipulation paralleled the techniques described in the ancient texts. The sudden withdrawal of financial backing for Tesla's projects takes on new significance when viewed in the context of suppressed knowledge and vested interests in maintaining energy scarcity. The mystery of the Ark's transportability provided another crucial insight into Atlantean capabilities. Biblical accounts describe the Ark of the Covenant being carried by only 4 men, yet the gold construction alone would have weighed nearly 1,000 pounds, with the stone tablets adding hundreds more. The Knights discovered that properly activated arcs exhibited controlled levitation effects, reducing their apparent weight to manageable levels. This revelation explained the role of the Levites, the priestly tribe assigned to ark maintenance and transport. The term Levite itself suggested levitation, indicating specialized knowledge of anti-gravity principles that had been passed down through generations of carefully trained guardians. The elaborate procedures and fatal consequences described for improper ark handling reflected the dangerous energies involved in maintaining and operating this advanced technology. The implications for modern applications were staggering. Anti-gravity technology could revolutionize transportation, eliminate the need for fossil fuels, and provide access to resources previously considered unreachable. Construction projects that currently require massive machinery and infrastructure could be completed with elegance and efficiency. The transformation of human civilization would be as dramatic as the original development of agriculture or the Industrial Revolution. Yet the Knights also understood why such technology had been lost and why it remained suppressed. The power to manipulate gravity and energy on this scale could be weaponized in ways that made conventional warfare seem primitive. A civilization that possessed these capabilities but lacked the wisdom to use them responsibly would inevitably face the same catastrophic fate that had befallen Atlantis. The guardianship role they had accepted required not just preservation of knowledge, but careful evaluation of humanity's readiness to receive it. The Templar Empire rises as the decades passed following their miraculous discoveries beneath Temple Mount. The Knights Templar began to construct something unprecedented in medieval Europe, an organization that transcended the traditional boundaries of church and state, accumulating power, wealth, and influence that would eventually challenge the very foundations of feudal society. What appeared to be the natural growth of a successful military order was in reality the careful implementation of ancient wisdom applied to medieval realities. From their humble beginning as 9 knights sworn to protect pilgrims, the Templars expanded into an international organization commanding tens of thousands of members across Europe and the Middle East. Their growth was meteoric by medieval standards, but those who understood their true mission recognized it as the systematic building of infrastructure necessary to preserve and eventually implement Atlantean knowledge in a world slowly preparing for such revelations. Their public success provided the perfect cover for their hidden agenda. As their reputation for courage and piety spread, noble families across Europe competed to grant them land, wealth, and privileges. The Templars established commanderies in every major kingdom, creating a network that enabled secure communication and resource coordination across vast distances. Their white mantles and red crosses became symbols of reliability and honor, opening doors that remained closed to traditional political and religious authorities. The banking innovations that made the Templars famous were actually applications of principles they had discovered in their ancient texts. The Atlanteans had developed sophisticated economic systems based on abundance rather than scarcity, cooperation rather than competition. While medieval Europe struggled with primitive barter systems and dangerous transportation of precious metals, the Templars implemented credit notes, deposit systems, and international currency exchange that wouldn't become standard practice for centuries. Their financial network enabled knights, merchants, and pilgrims to travel across Europe with minimal risk, depositing funds in one location and withdrawing equivalent amounts at distant destinations. This innovation alone revolutionized medieval commerce, but it also provided the Templars with detailed intelligence about political, economic, and social conditions throughout Christendom. Knowledge was power, and the Templars were systematically gathering both. The architectural legacy of the Templars reveals another layer of their hidden mission. Their construction projects, cathedrals, churches, and commanderies consistently incorporated principles of sacred geometry and astronomical alignment that encoded Atlantean knowledge in stone. These buildings were not merely places of worship but teaching tools, preserving mathematical and architectural principles that would otherwise have been lost to history. The placement of Templar crosses in locations worldwide created a symbolic network that modern researchers are only beginning to understand. These markers appeared in contexts that suggested systematic exploration and mapping activities that went far beyond their official military and religious duties. The consistency of symbolic language across continents indicated coordination and purpose that extended their mission into realms that mainstream history has never fully acknowledged. Behind their public facade of Orthodox Christianity, the Templars developed beliefs and practices that placed them in direct conflict with established church doctrine. Their exposure to Gnostic texts discovered beneath Temple Mount had revealed alternative interpretations of Christian teachings that emphasized personal spiritual development over institutional authority. They embraced concepts of reincarnation, direct divine communication, and the sacred feminine that challenged fundamental assumptions of medieval Catholicism. Their focus on John the Baptist as an initiator of Jesus into mystical traditions reflected their understanding of Christianity as part of a larger pattern of spiritual evolution that transcended individual religious systems. They conducted initiation ceremonies in locations that replicated the layout and proportions of the Great Pyramid's King's Chamber, suggesting that they understood the technological and spiritual purposes of these ancient monuments. The democratic principles that would later emerge in America found their earliest European expression in Templar philosophy. Their concept of God-given individual rights, spiritual freedom, and resistance to tyrannical authority challenged the divine right of kings and the absolute authority of the church centuries before such ideas became politically acceptable. They were developing the intellectual framework for a new kind of civilization based on individual empowerment and collective responsibility. As their power and independence grew, the Templars began to function as a sovereign nation without geographical boundaries. They commanded their own armies and navies, operated international trade networks, maintained agricultural and manufacturing systems, and owed allegiance to no earthly authority except their own leadership. Their success demonstrated that alternative forms of social organisation were not only possible, but superior to the feudal systems that dominated medieval Europe. Their financial dominance created both opportunities and dangers. European kings, including Philip VI of France, found themselves deeply indebted to Templar banking operations. The order's wealth and independence provided economic leverage that threatened traditional power structures. As their resources grew, so did their ability to influence political decisions and challenge authorities who opposed their interests. Pope Clement IV found himself caught between his spiritual obligations and his financial dependence on both the Templars and the French crown. The Church's official teachings were increasingly at odds with Templar practices and beliefs, yet the Order's wealth and power made direct confrontation dangerous. The perfect storm was building. Political ambition, religious conflict, and economic pressure would soon converge in a way that would test the Templars' carefully constructed defences. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo through history. The Templars had grown from 9 knights with a secret mission into an international power that threatened to reshape medieval society. Their enemies were gathering But the Order's greatest strength, their commitment to preserving ancient knowledge for future generations, would also prove to be their salvation. The betrayal that was coming would scatter their organisation, but not destroy their mission. The Great Betrayal and Escape. The conspiracy that brought down the Knights Templar was years in the making, born from a toxic combination of greed, debt and fear that reached into the highest levels of European power. King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, found himself in a position that many medieval rulers eventually faced. His military campaigns had left the royal treasury depleted, and his creditors were growing impatient. Unfortunately, for the Templars, they were his largest creditor, and their wealth made them an irresistible target for royal avarice. Philip's relationship with Pope Clement V provided the perfect mechanism for his planned theft. The Pope, who owed his elevation partly to French political support, found himself trapped between religious obligation and political necessity. The charges that would eventually be levelled against the Templars, heresy, blasphemy, idol worship, and immoral practices, were carefully crafted to justify confiscation of their assets, while avoiding awkward questions about the true motivations behind the persecution. The accusations were as creative as they were damning. The Templars were charged with denying Christ and spitting on crosses during secret initiation ceremonies, worshipping a mysterious idol called Baphomet, engaging in homosexual practices, and conducting rituals that mocked Christian doctrine. Financial crimes were added to ensure that even if the religious charges failed, secular authorities would have justification for seizing Templar property. But the real crime of the Knights Templar was far more threatening to established power than any of the official charges suggested. They had discovered knowledge that challenged the fundamental assumptions upon which medieval society was built. Their growing independence, their alternative religious beliefs, their democratic principles, and most dangerous of all, their possession of technology that could eliminate scarcity and transform human civilization. These were the true reasons for their persecution. The planning for the mass arrests was meticulous and coordinated on a scale rarely seen in medieval Europe. Philip's agents spent months preparing sealed orders that were distributed to royal officers throughout France with instructions not to open them until the night of October 12, 1307. The simultaneous nature of the operation was crucial. Any warning would have allowed the Templars to activate their escape plans and protect their most precious assets. Friday the 13th, October 1307, dawned with raids that shattered the pre-dawn silence across Europe. Over 100 Templars were arrested in France alone, including their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay. Similar operations were conducted in other kingdoms, though with varying degrees of success. The sudden collapse of an organisation that had seemed untouchable sent shockwaves throughout medieval society and gave birth to the superstition surrounding Friday the 13th that persists to this day. The 7 years of torture and interrogation that followed revealed both the determination of Philip's agents and the remarkable courage of the Templar leadership. Despite facing techniques designed to extract confessions from the most hardened criminals, many knights refused to validate the charges against their order. Those who did confess often recanted their statements when torture ceased, indicating that their admissions had been coerced rather than truthful. In 2001, researchers in the Vatican Secret Archives made a discovery that vindicated the Templars and exposed the true nature of their persecution. The Chinon parchment revealed that Pope Clement V had actually absolved the Templar leadership of heresy charges after a secret investigation by 3 cardinals. The evidence clearly demonstrated that the knights were innocent of the religious crimes used to justify their destruction, but political pressure from Philip IV forced the Pope to abandon justice in favour of expediency. This discovery confirmed what careful historians had long suspected. The Knights Templar were the victims of a coordinated conspiracy designed to eliminate a potential threat to established power while seizing their accumulated wealth. The charges were fabricated, the confessions were coerced, and the entire proceedings were a carefully orchestrated fraud that made Philip one of the richest monarchs in Europe, while destroying one of medieval Christianity's most successful organizations. But the conspiracy had a fatal flaw. It underestimated the Templars' intelligence network and their commitment to preserving their sacred mission. The Order's agents had been watching the political situation carefully, gathering intelligence about Philip's financial problems and his growing hostility toward their independence. They had weeks, perhaps months, to prepare for the crisis they knew was coming. On the night of October 12, 1307, just hours before the mass arrests were scheduled to begin, the entire Templar fleet disappeared from the French port of La Rochelle. Along with the ships went the Order's most precious treasures: the artifacts discovered beneath Temple Mount, the accumulated wealth of 2 centuries, and the complete archives documenting their secret knowledge. The disappearance was so complete and well coordinated that it could only have been planned long in advance. The decision to sacrifice their leadership while preserving their mission demonstrated the profound commitment that defined the Templar Brotherhood. Jacques de Molay and his companions chose to remain in France, knowing they faced imprisonment, torture, and death in order to provide cover for the organization's survival. Their martyrdom bought precious time for the escape operations and created a legend that would inspire future generations of truth seekers. De Molay's final prophecy, delivered from the flames of his execution pyre, seemed to invoke divine justice upon his persecutors. He called upon Philip and Clement to join him before God's tribunal within a year. Pope Clement V died of mysterious causes within 5 weeks, and King Philip IV suffered a stroke and died within 8 months. Whether coincidence or divine intervention, these deaths reinforced the belief that the Templars possessed powers that transcended ordinary human understanding. The survivors of the persecution scattered across Europe, carrying their knowledge and traditions into new organizations and movements. In Portugal, they transformed into the Order of Christ and continued their maritime explorations that would eventually reach the Americas. In Scotland, they helped establish early Masonic lodges that preserved architectural and symbolic knowledge through ritual and ceremony. In Germany, they influenced Rosicrucian societies that maintained alchemical and mystical traditions. The Great Betrayal had failed in its ultimate objective. While Philip succeeded in seizing Templar properties in France and temporarily crushing their visible organization, he had not destroyed their mission or recovered their most important treasures. The Knights had vanished into the shadows of history, but their sacred trust continued through hidden networks that would preserve ancient knowledge for future generations brave enough to seek the truth. The global legacy. The destruction of the visible Templar organization in 1307 marked not an ending, but a transformation. Like a river forced underground, the Order's mission continued through hidden channels that spread across continents, carrying ancient knowledge and sacred traditions through centuries of persecution and suppression. The Knights, who had once worn their crosses openly, now worked in the shadows, adapting their identities to local conditions while maintaining their core commitment to preserving humanity's lost heritage. In Portugal, the transformation was almost seamless. King Dinis refused to implement the papal orders dissolving the Templars, instead allowing them to reorganize as the Order of Christ. This new identity provided perfect cover for continuing their maritime exploration activities, which had always been motivated by more than simple trade or conquest. Under the patronage of Prince Henry the Navigator, Templar knowledge of advanced navigation techniques, cartography, and astronomical calculation enabled Portuguese voyages that opened new sea routes to Africa, Asia, and eventually the Americas. The Order of Christ's Cross, a modified version of the Templar symbol, flew on the sails of Portuguese ships that discovered lands already marked on ancient maps preserved in Templar archives. Christopher Columbus himself carried these symbols on his voyages, and his access to navigational knowledge that seemed impossibly advanced for his time suggests connections to networks that preserved pre-Columbian geographical information. Scotland provided another refuge where Templar traditions could continue under different forms. The excommunication of King Robert the Bruce created a unique political situation where papal orders carried no weight, allowing fleeing Templars to establish themselves without fear of persecution. Here they helped establish the foundations of what would become modern Freemasonry, embedding their architectural knowledge, symbolic language, and philosophical principles into craft guild traditions that would survive for centuries. Rosslyn Chapel, built in 1446 by William Sinclair, stands as perhaps the most explicit architectural testimony to Templar survival in Scotland. The chapel's design incorporates hundreds of symbols that directly reference Templar traditions, including explicit gravestones bearing the inscription Knights Templar. More remarkable still are the carvings of plants that were unknown in Europe at the time of construction, corn and trillium, which are native to North America, suggesting that Templar explorations had reached the New World decades before Columbus. The chapel's abundance of green man imagery, over 100 carvings representing the ancient pagan deity of nature and fertility, demonstrates the syncretic approach that allowed Templar traditions to blend with local customs and beliefs. These weren't merely decorative elements but encoded messages about the integration of spiritual traditions that predated and transcended organised Christianity. The Sinclair family's role in preserving and continuing Templar activities extended far beyond Scotland. Sir Henry Sinclair's documented voyage to North America in 1398 established contact with indigenous peoples who preserved oral traditions of white brothers arriving from across the Eastern Sea. These legends, found among tribes from the Atlantic coast to the Great Lakes region, describe visitors who possessed advanced knowledge and formed alliances with native peoples. Archaeological evidence supports these accounts of pre-Columbian European presence in North America. The Kensington runestone, discovered in Minnesota and dated to 1362, bears inscriptions that reference a party of 8 Goths and 22 Norwegians on exploration journey from Vinland over the west. The Newport Tower in Rhode Island displays octagonal construction that mirrors Templar architectural principles found in European commanderies. The Narragansett runestone bears symbols that combine Norse runes with Templar crosses. These discoveries suggest systematic exploration and mapping activities that extended Templar operations across the Atlantic long before official European colonization. The knowledge gained from these voyages provided crucial advantages to later explorers who seemed to possess remarkably accurate information about New World geography, resources, and native populations. The mysterious Oak Island in Nova Scotia presents perhaps the most intriguing evidence of Templar presence in North America. Since its discovery in 1795, the island's elaborate underground construction, known as the Money Pit, has revealed engineering sophistication that defies explanation by conventional historical accounts. The precision of the flood tunnel systems, the layers of coded symbols, and the deadly protective measures suggest a construction project that was both extremely important and designed to resist unauthorized access for centuries. Masonic involvement in Oak Island excavation efforts has been extensive and well documented, with many treasure hunters demonstrating detailed knowledge of Templar symbolism and construction techniques. The island's location, accessible only to those with advanced navigational knowledge, and its elaborate protective systems suggest it was designed as a repository for items of extraordinary value and significance. The transformation of Templar naval traditions into what history remembers as the Golden Age of piracy reveals another layer of their survival strategy. The Jolly Roger flag, with its skull and crossbones symbol, directly references Templar imagery found on medieval gravestones and ceremonial objects. The democratic governance structures of pirate crews, their sophisticated communication networks, and their strategic use of Caribbean islands as bases all echo organisational principles developed during the Order's legitimate period. More significantly, many pirate captains demonstrated navigational knowledge and access to maps that enabled them to locate Spanish treasure fleets with uncanny accuracy. Their ability to evade naval pursuit through intimate knowledge of ocean currents, weather patterns, and hidden harbours suggests access to maritime intelligence networks that transcended individual crews or even national boundaries. The architectural legacy of the Templars extends far beyond their obvious monuments, encoding messages in structures that remain functional today. The consistent use of the number 8 in their constructions, from octagonal churches to 8-pointed crosses, references both the geometric principles underlying their sacred knowledge and the spiritual significance of completion and renewal found in Gnostic traditions. The Great Pyramid's recently discovered 8-sided construction validates this symbolic language, revealing that even the most famous monument of the ancient world incorporates principles that the Templars understood and preserved. Their cathedral projects across Europe consistently display measurements and proportions that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of acoustic engineering, astronomical alignment, and energy-focusing techniques that mainstream architecture has never fully appreciated. Modern researchers have begun to recognize that these symbolic markers form coherent networks that encode information about geographical relationships, astronomical alignments, and energy patterns that extend across continental boundaries. The Templars weren't simply marking territories they had visited, they were preserving navigational and scientific knowledge in forms that would survive political upheavals and cultural changes. The survival of Templar traditions through multiple organizational transformations demonstrates the resilience of their core mission. Whether operating as Portuguese explorers, Scottish Masons, German Rosicrucians, or Caribbean pirates, they maintained their fundamental commitment to preserving ancient knowledge and preparing humanity for eventual enlightenment. Their ability to adapt to local conditions while preserving essential teachings enabled them to survive centuries of persecution and continue their work across multiple continents. This global legacy reveals the true scope of the Templar achievement. They had successfully created a civilization within civilization, a hidden network that transcended national boundaries, religious differences, and political conflicts. Their influence shaped the development of democratic principles, scientific advancement, geographical exploration, and spiritual evolution in ways that mainstream history has never fully acknowledged. The threads of their influence can be traced through the Renaissance recovery of classical knowledge, the Age of Exploration's navigational breakthroughs, the Enlightenment's democratic ideals, and the Scientific Revolution's empirical methods. In each case, crucial knowledge appeared at precisely the right moment to advance human development, preserved and transmitted by networks that maintain Templar principles of universal brotherhood and service to humanity's highest potential. Critical analysis and evidence. As we approach the climax of this extraordinary narrative, we must pause to examine the claims we've explored with the careful scrutiny that such remarkable assertions demand. The story of the Knights Templar's secret discovery of Atlantean technology beneath Temple Mount represents either one of history's most successful cover-ups or one of its most compelling legends. The truth, as it often does, likely lies somewhere between absolute fact and pure fiction. Mainstream historians approach the Templar treasure theories with considerable skepticism, and their concerns deserve serious consideration. Archaeological excavations beneath and around Temple Mount, while limited by political and religious sensitivities, have uncovered pottery sherds, animal bones, coins, and other artifacts typical of ancient occupation sites. No credible archaeological evidence supports claims of advanced technological discoveries or repositories of Atlantean artifacts. The official records of the Knights Templar, extensive as they are, focus primarily on banking operations, military activities, property management, and religious observances. Contemporary accounts from the medieval period describe their role in protecting pilgrims, their innovative financial systems, and their military prowess, but contain no references to extraordinary technological discoveries or secret missions to recover ancient artifacts. The absence of contemporary documentation is particularly significant given the medieval tendency to record miraculous events and divine interventions in great detail. If the Templars had indeed discovered functional examples of advanced ancient technology, such remarkable findings would likely have generated some documentation, even if kept secret from broader public knowledge. However, the discovery of the Chinon parchment in 2001 provides undeniable evidence that official historical narratives about the Templars have been incomplete and, in crucial respects, deliberately falsified. This Vatican document proves that Pope Clement V secretly absolved the Templar leadership of heresy charges while publicly supporting their persecution. The political, rather than religious motivation for their destruction is now historically established fact rather than conspiracy theory. This documented cover-up raises legitimate questions about what other aspects of Templar history might have been suppressed or misrepresented. If medieval and church authorities were willing to fabricate heresy charges and conceal papal absolution, they might also have hidden evidence of discoveries that threatened established power structures or challenged religious orthodoxy. The question of Atlantis itself remains contentious among scholars. Plato's original dialogues, written around 360 BCE, present the story as a philosophical allegory about the rise and fall of ideal societies rather than a historical account of actual events. Most classical scholars interpret Atlantis as Plato's literary device for exploring political and ethical themes rather than his description of a real civilization. More recent research has identified potential real-world inspirations for Plato's narrative. The Minoan civilization of Crete, destroyed by volcanic eruption around 1500 BCE, possessed advanced maritime technology, sophisticated urban planning, and cultural achievements that surpassed most ancient societies. The sudden destruction of Thera, modern Santorini, created tsunamis and climatic changes that affected civilizations across the Mediterranean. The global distribution of similar architectural techniques, symbolic systems, and mythological themes points toward either extensive ancient contact networks or common sources of knowledge that influenced widely separated cultures. Pyramids appear on every continent, built by civilizations that supposedly had no contact with each other. Sacred geometry principles appear consistently in structures separated by thousands of miles and centuries of time. Modern suppression of alternative energy research provides contemporary context for understanding how transformative technologies might be hidden or controlled. The pattern of suppression extends to consciousness research, archaeological investigations, and historical studies that challenge established narratives. Academic careers, research funding, and publication opportunities depend upon conformity to accepted paradigms, creating systemic bias against revolutionary discoveries or alternative interpretations of evidence. The Temple Mount itself remains one of the world's most politically sensitive archaeological sites, with excavation severely limited by competing religious and political claims. The underground chambers and passages that do exist have been only partially explored, leaving open the possibility that significant discoveries remain hidden beneath layers of political restriction and religious taboo. Recent ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive techniques have revealed extensive underground structures beneath Temple Mount that have never been fully investigated. Israeli, Palestinian, and international authorities continue to limit access to these areas, citing security concerns and religious sensitivities that may conceal archaeological motivations. The consistency of symbolic language across Templar sites worldwide suggests systematic coordination and shared knowledge that extends beyond coincidence or independent development. Whether this indicates preservation of ancient wisdom traditions or simply effective organizational communication, the patterns deserve serious scholarly attention rather than dismissive rejection. The survival of specialized knowledge through secret societies and mystery schools has ample historical precedent. Alchemical traditions preserved chemical and metallurgical knowledge through centuries when such information was considered dangerous or heretical. Masonic organizations maintained architectural and engineering principles through periods when such knowledge was restricted to guild members. The truth about Templar discoveries may ultimately be less important than the questions their story raises about historical methodology, evidence evaluation, and the relationship between official narratives and hidden realities. Whether dealing with ancient technology or modern cover-ups, the principles of careful investigation, open-minded inquiry, and evidence-based conclusion remain our best tools for approaching the truth. Now, we must contemplate the profound implications of the narrative we have explored. Whether the Knights Templar actually discovered functional Atlantean technology, or whether this remains an inspiring legend, the questions raised challenge our fundamental assumptions about history, progress, and human potential in ways that demand serious consideration. If the claims we have examined prove accurate, if ancient artifacts with transformative capabilities truly lie hidden in modern vaults awaiting humanity's readiness, the implications would reshape every aspect of human civilization. The energy revolution alone would eliminate the artificial scarcity that drives much of our current global conflict, providing unlimited clean power that could reverse environmental damage while enabling abundance that makes poverty a historical memory rather than a persistent reality. But even if these specific claims prove to be elaborate myth rather than suppressed history, the legend itself serves crucial functions in our current global crisis. The story of the Knights Templar inspires hope that solutions exist for problems that seem insurmountable through conventional approaches. It encourages questioning of official narratives that may conceal important truths or alternative possibilities. The power of such legends lies not necessarily in their literal accuracy, but in their capacity to expand imagination and encourage exploration of possibilities that materialistic worldviews might otherwise dismiss. The story validates the intuitive sense that human potential extends far beyond current achievements, and that ancient wisdom traditions may preserve knowledge that modern civilization has forgotten or suppressed. Cultural impact extends beyond individual inspiration to collective transformation of how we approach learning, discovery, and social organization. The Templar narrative encourages interdisciplinary thinking that bridges science and spirituality, history and speculation, individual development and collective evolution. It validates alternative approaches to knowledge that complement rather than replace rigorous scientific methodology. Educational benefits include the development of critical thinking skills that can evaluate extraordinary claims without rejecting them automatically, the cultivation of historical research abilities that can distinguish between evidence and assumption, and the practice of multiple perspective consideration that enables more sophisticated understanding of complex situations. The historical facts that we can verify provide solid foundation for at least some elements of the larger narrative. The Templar persecution was indeed politically motivated rather than religiously justified, as proven by Vatican documents that remained hidden for 7 centuries. Knowledge suppression has occurred repeatedly throughout history, often to protect powerful interests rather than serve genuine security needs. Ancient civilizations did possess capabilities that conventional chronologies struggle to explain, from precise megalithic construction to sophisticated astronomical calculations. Technology suppression continues in our modern era, with alternative energy research facing systematic obstacles that suggest deliberate limitation rather than natural market forces. Our individual responsibility in responding to such mysteries involves maintaining intellectual humility that can consider extraordinary possibilities while demanding appropriate evidence. We must develop the ability to question official narratives without falling into paranoid cynicism, to seek multiple information sources while maintaining discrimination about reliability and accuracy. Critical thinking skills become essential tools for navigating information environments where truth and fiction, evidence and speculation, genuine revelation and deliberate disinformation all compete for attention and belief. The capacity to remain open to transformative possibilities while maintaining skeptical evaluation represents the mature approach to extraordinary claims. The Templar legacy, whether historical or legendary, embodies principles that remain relevant: the pursuit of knowledge despite persecution, the preservation of wisdom through dark ages, the commitment to universal human benefit rather than narrow group advantage, and the maintenance of hope through centuries of apparent defeat. The freedom they sought from oppressive systems, the spiritual independence they pursued, the importance they placed on knowledge preservation, and their faith in humanity's eventual readiness for enlightenment provide inspiration for modern seekers facing their own challenges with institutional authority and systematic suppression of transformative possibilities. Tonight, we've journeyed together through 8 centuries of hidden history, from the mysterious chambers beneath Temple Mount to modern repositories that may still guard humanity's greatest secrets. We've explored the possibility that the Knights Templar were not merely medieval warriors, but guardians of ancient wisdom that could transform our world. We've examined claims of Atlantean technology, traced symbols across continents, and pondered whether revolutionary capabilities remain hidden, waiting for humanity's readiness. Whether you view this narrative as suppressed history or inspiring legend, the questions it raises about human potential, institutional power, and our collective future remain profoundly relevant. In our age of global challenges, perhaps we need the Templar spirit more than ever: the courage to seek truth, the wisdom to preserve knowledge, and the hope that solutions exist beyond our current limitations. So I leave you with this final mystery. If you possessed knowledge that could eliminate poverty, cure disease, and restore our planet's health, but releasing it prematurely might cause chaos or enable tyranny, what would you choose? How long would you wait for humanity to prove itself worthy of its own salvation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious about your perspective on these ancient mysteries and modern possibilities. If this journey through hidden history has sparked your imagination, please like this video and subscribe to help us continue exploring the secrets that shape our world. Until we meet again, sweet dreams, fellow guardians of human wisdom.